Hi, my name is Carmen, and I am an early childhood special education teacher, a life and ADHD coach, and I'm the host of this podcast, Authentically ADHD. I created this podcast to help anyone wondering if they have ADHD, people who have been diagnosed for a while and want some more support and community. I'm here to bring you the latest research on ADHD and neurodiversities while we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of ADHD. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi there, and welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing? Are you talking nicely to yourself? Are you being nice to yourself? If not, I totally understand. If you're trying, that's all that really matters. Because knowledge is power and self awareness is the key. That's what I've learned through this journey, and I'm hoping to share it with you. Because as I was brainstorming podcast topics for this week and what I could do as a podcast topic, I decided to do a deep dive on something that I've struggled with pretty much all of my life, like all of my schooling and adult life, and that is the burnout cycle. Now, usually I just call it burnout when I'm talking about it in general, but I'm talking about the burnout cycle, the stages of burnout, and how we experience it. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? You shame, berate, and beat yourself into doing the tasks, becoming even less self aware, and then you totally burn out like a car running out of gas. But instead of needing more gas like the car, you need sleep, TV, mindless activities, food, and or to basically just do little to nothing for like 1 to 5 days. Who am I relating to here? Really, seriously, because I've lived this cycle during my college years into my work life, and I'm still trying to get a good handle on my own burnout and ways that I can prevent it from happening. I do know that I have written podcasts and I have spoken on burnout before, but I love sharing new perspectives and fresh perspectives with you because, again, knowledge is power and self awareness is the key, especially when you have ADHD. The more self aware that you can become and the more knowledge that you have can seriously improve your quality of life. I am a product of that. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Speaking of extra supports, I just wanted to tell you all that I've updated my Patreon page to include all of the resources that I've really ever made to be held in one place. Just head to my show notes. The VIP members do get a little extra, but you can also purchase like my brand new ultimate ADHD journal and planner, which I've been using for the past year that has worked. Nothing is priced over $10 and everything is at least 50 to 100 pages that you can download and print. You can get it binded and sent to you, or you can just read it off your screen and use notebook paper. So if you want or need any type of that kind of extra support, just head to my show notes and click the Patreon link to join. I hope to see you in there. So, first, I want to talk about what burnout is and what contributes to it. Because, see, burnout is not just an ADHD thing, it is a human thing. All humans deal with burnout. what I'm going to focus on is that ADHDers and people who have neurodivergent brains struggle with getting burned out easier and faster than our neurotypical peers for two different reasons. One of the reasons is from Dr. Barkley's research, and it's that people with ADHD, we overestimate what we can do in the short term, and we underestimate what we can get done in the long term. We tend to think that we can or should be able to complete these grandiose projects in one day, or, for example, writing a paper that's due the night before it's due and getting the whole thing done. And then we underestimate what we can get done in like the long term. For example, doing a part of the paper each day leading up to the due date. We have a hard time picturing what done is and building steps in order to get to done in a healthier way. Okay. Reason two is that our neurodiverse brains are really not good at being self aware. It takes a lot of practice for us. As a neurotypical people, they just know when, oh, I'm hungry, I'm going to go to the bathroom. They don't, or I'm hungry, I'm going to go eat, or I have to use the bathroom, I'm going to go use the bathroom. I know this because I was finishing writing a sentence in this podcast, holding off the urge because I had to pee. Like, it's the basic needs that we put off because we are less self-aware, or even if we're aware of it, we ignore those basic needs. We are not good at using reflection and self-evaluation. We struggle to not make those same mistakes over and over and over again because we don't evaluate, we don't tend to evaluate and adjust what we are doing. And this tends to keep us stuck in this terrible cycle of burnout. I mean, like, of course we want to work at full capacity every single day. You want to know why? Because it feels good. It feels good when we complete a lot in one day. And we love feeling good. I mean, who doesn't? But like I've said before, the point of life is not to feel good all the time. It's to experience all of the emotions and enjoy life. So the truth is, living in this cycle of burnout is unhealthy, and it can cause serious illness, physical, mental, and emotional turmoil. It can even land you in the hospital. I know this because I've ended up in the hospital from burnout before. So what is burnout? Burnout is defined as a physical and or mental collapse caused by overwork and or stress and overwhelm. Burnout is what happens when we continuously go past our capacity until we basically internally combust. Capacity is a big part of burnout. It's a big part of the self-awareness of burnout. Capacity is defined as the maximum amount a person can hold and produce. In my opinion, we aren't as bad at like time management than we think we are. What we're really quote unquote bad at is knowing our capacity and then changing our behavior to avoid getting stuck in the burnout cycle. Okay? This is what I feel we lack, is the self-awareness to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and if we're doing too much. We don't tend to check in with ourselves throughout the day. Am I tired? Do I need food? Do I need to take a break? Okay? And on top of this, we aren't even aware that there are three types of capacity that all humans naturally have, and a lot of times as ADHDers, we do not take this into consideration. So, type one of the three types of capacity is cognitive capacity. So, this is any of that admin work, paperwork, bill paying, data collection, answering questions, decision making, and planning and prioritizing. Notice how at least 4 or 5 of the things that I said are things that we as ADHDers are already deficient in, such as decision making, planning, and prioritizing. And that already, all that paperwork and bill paying, that requires organization. Another thing that we struggle with. And answering questions is something that you will deal with if you are a mom, a teacher, or somebody who works in a field where people ask a lot of questions, usually children. The second type of capacity is emotional capacity. This is where our emotional regulation happens. This is where helping your children to emotionally regulate, if you have kids, or for me, my students, it's that fight with your significant other or that friend who you keep forgetting to text back. That is the emotional capacity. We carry that all the emotions about work, all the emotions about family, friends, relationships. That is the second type of capacity. And believe me when I tell you that these parts of capacity, we may not think that they are as full as they really are. That takes serious self inventory and self awareness. Okay, so the third type is physical capacity. This applies to your sleep, your exercise, your water intake, whether you take medications or not, if you take your vitamins, if you have a demanding physical job, such as being wait staff or a nurse or a teacher or a construction worker, or whether you work on your own, projects at home and or, chasing toddlers around if you have them. It has to do with your eating habits and any other comorbid disorders you may have, such as anxiety, depression, chronic pain, etc. There are so many comorbidities that go along with ADHD, and autism is actually on the rise of being noticed as something that people with ADHD also have. That Venn diagram of autism and ADHD, that's more of an accurate description than even just either of the diagnoses alone, especially in later diagnosed people who are diagnosed with ADHD. The autism can still be missed because we tend to mask on both sides and cover them both up. See, we already have a set capacity, and we as ADHDers tend to try to fill our tank to the top, not leaving any room for life to happen, like traffic, things we can't control, a kid getting sick, you getting sick, a season of life that affects your the amount that you're able to work. Like if you have two small toddlers and pets at home and you don't have much help, this is going to affect how much capacity you have. Sometimes we don't have enough capacity past those three main capacities in our life to do much else, and that's okay. Again, we don't grow out of shame, so please do not use this episode to shame, okay? Growth can never happen with shame. They are incompatible, and I'm promising you right now from experience, from all of the people that I've coached in my life and through my coaching membership, I've learned that you cannot shame your way to growth and change that actually is sustainable and healthy. Why? Because shame is toxic, okay? It's healthy to have guilt about certain things that we may not be as good at or that we may not like to do. But I'm telling you right now that shaming yourself is a toxic way to become burnt out and to get stuck in this cycle. It also involves that negative self talk. You'll notice as I go through the stages of burnout that the negative self talk that goes along with each stage probably gets worse and worse and worse. All right, are you ready to get into the stages of burnout? Let's get started with that. So, the first stage is kind of hard to recognize, and it's called the honeymoon stage for a reason. Because in this stage, you will probably feel some type of euphoria and you'll have a sense of accomplishment with how much you are getting done. Because at this point, we are working at or past our capacity. But with our lack of self awareness, we tend to take on more and more. And if you have perfectionist or people pleasing tendencies, you will say yes more. You will accept more work until you've basically reached stage two. All right. In stage two, it's called the onset of stress. You may become more fatigued. You may experience a little anxiety, some sleeplessness, and other slight symptoms of burnout, such as like headaches and forgetfulness. But sometimes with neurodiverse brains, it's still really hard to recognize stage two because we just think that we need, I just need to get more sleep tonight and then I'll be fine tomorrow. We don't realize that we need a bigger break than that. And as we go through each of these stages, it makes it that much faster to get to the next one unless you become more self aware and you know when it's happening in order to stop it and eventually attempt to avoid burnout altogether. Okay, like self awareness is the big thing here because we usually have these problematic positive thoughts, such as, I'm fine, I can get through this. Like some of the things that I see on Instagram, like just push through and blah, blah, blah. When we were told as children to just push through when we didn't feel well and we were likely in stage two of burnout, what was happening was we were being forced and being pushed right into stage three by being told, you're fine. How many times have you heard you're fine? Okay, these are learned things that we can change. Okay, we can rewire these things in our brain, but I'm just pointing out maybe one thing that could have led to this is as a child telling somebody that we're having headaches, that you're a little tired, and being told that you're fine just kind of made it, you know, acceptable. And then we enter stage three. And this one is called chronic stress because it's when we have hit chronic stress level in burnout. We feel overwhelmed. We are overscheduled. We may isolate, cancel activities, and start to feel an overall sense of helplessness. Again, helplessness is learned. And helplessness is one of the biggest things that ADHDers have as a learned behavior or as a learned feeling because we've gone through life growing up neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, just telling us to push through. In this stage, usually sleep is difficult. Our appetite is way off. Either we're eating way too much or not enough. And our productivity, it takes a big hit. We forget appointments and meetings. We make erratic decisions. And overall, we become unpleasant and sometimes even overall just apathetic towards life. So, usually, if burnout is not reversed by now or you have not recognized it, you will most likely get stuck in the stages of this burnout cycle because stage four is labeled burnout. Yep, stage four is called burnout. And this is when you may experience chronic stress, exhaustion, relentless headaches, heightened anxiety, frequent illness. Yes, I'm talking about frequent colds, stomach bugs, and those types of things because as burnout goes up, your immune system goes down because it's focusing on keeping you alive and keeping you well. Because you may even have issues with your gut. You may have some chronic pain and you might have just complete loss of motivation, which is not only affecting the amount of work that you can produce, but it's also affecting the quality of your work. The quality of your work will suffer due to the fact that you have these burnout symptoms. Okay. Now, at this point, we are like a crazy juggling clown with only half our makeup on, juggling 2 out of the 6 things that we started with. When we enter stage 5, it's called habitual burnout. The reason it's called habitual burnout is because usually, if you don't seek help, you will get stuck in the burnout cycle. Because during this stage, you are mentally and physically and emotionally exhausted. You may start to experience chronic sadness. Even if you don't struggle with depression, you may even fall into one. You're unable to commit to any tasks because you aren't even meeting the deadlines that you already have, and you are becoming more forgetful, irritable. And at this point, when this cycle becomes habitual, we fall into it. And sometimes we may need to seek medical help in order to stop it. There may need to be an intervention of some sort. This is when I do suggest and I do remind you that I am a coach and a teacher. I am not a doctor. I am not a therapist. Seek help from a medical professional, a therapist, a psychiatrist, a nurse practitioner, because burnout is something that's so much more dangerous than people realize. When I was in my first year of teaching, I would get up and I would do, my get ready tasks, and I would go off to work, and I would usually get there early, about an hour early from start time. And I would stay after until like the late hours of like after dinner, doing things that whether they were in my job description or not, I was doing them. By the end of the year, not even the end of the year, I would say it was around March, I was in some kind of manic episode. Now, this is contributed to the fact that doctors had me on some medications that did not bode well together, which is why I do suggest, if you have a mental health illness, please seek help for medication from a nurse practitioner who is certified in psychology. Okay. You want a psychiatrist. All right. General practitioners are great, but they don't always have the continuing education to understand all of the psychological interactions that could happen with medications, and they're less likely to notice. Now, these medications and society and my own mindset was telling me that I was fine, but I was not sleeping, I was not eating, I was drinking way too much coffee, and I arrived at work one day completely out of my mind. I was talking a mile a minute. I don't even remember what my weird, grandiose idea was, but I had some idea. And remind you, you need to remember, this is like almost the end of the school year, and I'm thinking of a whole new idea to do for a whole new unit when I already had plans up until the end of the year. And I remember calling the school. I needed a cart to bring stuff into work. Now, thank goodness that the person that I was working with at the time, she noticed and she called and got me some help. I went to the emergency room and they suggested that I check in to our local mental health institution. This is where I stayed for 6 days in order to get better and to get some of the medications I was on that I didn't need to be on out of my system. See, this is really what I wanted to teach throughout this episode, because there are tons of tips and tricks to stay out of burnout and ways to avoid it. But what I really wanted to focus on is our self awareness around it, our ability to reflect and change our behavior accordingly, because we as neurodiverse people struggle more often with working past our capacity. Okay. This episode is for knowledge, not shame. We cannot shame our way into growth. Remember, knowledge is power and self awareness is the key. I hope that through this episode, you gain some insight from my story and some knowledge from the cycles and the stages of burnout. And I cannot wait to chat again. Stay authentic, my friends, and we will talk soon. Hi, friend. Could you do me a huge favor? If you're not already, could you scroll up to the top of your podcast app and click that follow button and possibly give me a rating and, if you could, a review? It would mean so much to me and my goal to get as much information out to the people with ADHD as possible. I appreciate you so much for listening. Thank you, and let's get back to the show.